that is what keeps you grounded, and that is what helps you to build your processes out around your life versus your life having to adapt to your work.
Right.
And that's very important, because if you have that foundation, that is what helps you to set healthy boundaries and to communicate your needs and to set up the types of support and accommodations you need, and then to also have a healthy balance. I don't even think we should have a work-life balance. Work is just a small aspect of our life. It shouldn't be this duality where it's taking up half of our life. Right. And the reason why we're working independently is to have that level of freedom and agency over our lives. So we need to kind of divest from the corporate grind ideology and mentality.
Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of DEI in 5. I am so excited, so fortunate. I'm joined today by Dr. Samantha Rae, also known as Dr. Sam, who is a leading DEI strategist, I cannot talk today, and systems analyst, and she's also the dynamic force behind DSRD Consulting. She's also the creator of the app DEI Offload, which is designed specifically to support the mental health of individuals working in the DEI sector. I can't say enough about it. I love it. I use it. I'm more of a lurker, but I think it's a fantastic app. And she has over a decade of experience, and she's brought transformative DEI solutions to organizations like Goodwill, Save the Children, and NIH, and she's impacted over 10,000 employees. Her work also extends into the academic sector as well. So she's worked with leaders from over 50 universities across the nation to embed DEI into their processes. Dr. Sam also holds a bachelor's in biology, a master's in public health, and a doctorate in leadership and organizational management. She works with the intersection between DEI and business systems optimization and development. And last year, in 2022 alone, she partnered with global change makers from over 30 companies, including AWS, Meta, Lyft. I could keep going on, but she worked with them to improve their workplace culture. And she has supported over 400 DEI practitioners worldwide. So if you're not picking up what I'm putting down, she is the right person to talk to for a lot of reasons today. And today we're going to really kind of explore this idea of mental health, neurodiversity, neurodivergence. And I think we're going to be kind of talking about it from our perspectives as Black women, as entrepreneurs, and as DEI practitioners. I think this conversation is coming at a really important time. I mean, it's Mental Health Awareness Month currently, and I can't even keep up at this point, but almost every week there's like a new study or a new article about the current mental health crisis, or, one of the recent studies that I was reading about was, the effects that remote work is having on people, and how depression rates are higher and loneliness is higher. And that's, due largely in part to us being so isolated. And then if you're an entrepreneur, that's just a whole other things. So yeah. I thought it would be helpful for us to just talk a little bit more about it. I think we spend so much time, especially as entrepreneurs, talking about the journey and, trying to help people get a sense of how to get started and talking about the logistics of businesses. But there's so much mental and emotional work that comes with this. Mm-hmm. And I don't think there's enough being said about that piece of it. So I guess to start, how are we even defining neurodiversity and neurodivergence? Which I know you feel some type of way about those terms. So I want to also cover that too.
Yes. So first, hello, and thank you so much for having me. I love your show, and I think you always cover all the important topics and the hot stuff that's happening. I'm like, how do you have time to...
I don't know, actually.
You're like a news reporter. You be on it.
I did go to journalism school, so I think it's in part...
Oh, okay. That makes sense. Okay. Yeah. So yes, mental health, working in DEI, being an entrepreneur, neurodivergence, and neurodiversity.
All the things.
So for neurodiversity, I think the definition is accepting different ways of thinking, embracing people with different neurological, I don't want to use the word abilities, but the different ways people process information and think. People with neurological disorders and disabilities, so ADHD, autism, embracing and creating equitable access to resources and providing accommodations for those folks. To me, that's what neurodiversity means. Yeah. And just being aware that people think differently. And when I say that, I don't mean like, oh, someone thinks that they should tie their shoes one way and another person thinks they should tie their shoes another. I don't mean like that, because a lot of people like to weaponize diversity in thinking and say, well, I can spew whatever mess that I want, and that's diversity of thought. So you need to accept it. But no, I mean people who at a neurological level have differences in physically how their brains are developed and how they process information mentally. So that's neurodiversity. Neurodivergence, people use that term to describe the fact that some people's way of thinking diverge from the norm. Right. And I don't like that term because I don't think there is a norm. I think when speaking about like statistics, like yes, there are probably a higher percentage of people whose brain functions similarly. Sure. But I don't like the word normal, because that's how we get into things like marginalization and oppression. Because if we have one set standard of doing something and someone deviates from it, they're on the margins. And that's also rooted in white supremacy. That's a tenet of white supremacy, that there's only one right way to be and do things. Exactly. So that's my take on neurodiversity and neurodivergence. I know some people use the term neurospicy, but that's also yes, that's also so a lot of people of color use that term, but I'm kind of on the fence about that too, because there are a lot of stereotypes or stigmas around the word spicy. If you're a Black woman or a Latina woman, femme presenting, spicy is like a microaggressive term because it's tied to like aggression or being aggressive. And I may be thinking a little too deep, but I don't know.
I think you are. It's perpetuating stereotypes that, people have pushed back against for so long. So I could see that as well. I've never heard of that one, but
yeah, on TikTok, a lot of people use that instead of like neurodivergent. And in some activism spaces related to like autism and ADHD, some people using the term neurospicy is a red flag for them, because it's steeped in like eugenicist mind of thinking. Like there's just a whole lot. So I don't even like to use certain terms. I feel the same way about like BIPOC and all the acronyms.
Don't get me started. I cannot. And I hate when people like reference me as a woman of color. I'm like, I am a Black woman, very specifically. Address me accordingly. So that's another conversation. I think one of the things I've noticed recently is people seem to just be throwing around those terms a lot, like neurodiversity, and without fully understanding them, which can be quite frustrating too. So I think it's important for people to just even have conversations about what these terms even mean. So I appreciate you even sharing like neurospicy, because now I got to go down a rabbit hole and explore that one. I know that recently you've been pretty open about your experiences with being diagnosed with autism, and I myself have talked quite a bit about my experiences with depression, anxiety, and certainly ADHD, which I struggle with on a daily basis. And I'm just curious, how has and I don't know if you define it as a neurological disability, but and you can define it how you want, but how has that influenced your journey as an entrepreneur? And then in addition to that, as an entrepreneur in the DEI space?
Yeah, very layered question. So to your point about referring to it as a neurological disability, just that, let's just start there. Like internalizing, or not even internalizing, but coming to grips with the fact that having autism or being autistic, because I don't like to say you have autism. Like my brain, autistic brains are literally wired differently. Like physically, the brain has a different amount of neurons to process information. That's why autistic folks get overstimulated. So like physically, there is something different about your brain. So you can't have it. It's not like a thing that you can get and take away. It won't go away. So it is a neurological disability, and finding out that you're disabled as an adult and then retroactively going back and realizing, wow, I needed accommodations. That's why X, Y, and Z happened or played out that way. That's a lot to process. So yes, it is a neurological disability. And I know the word disability is very stigmatized for folks, and there's a lot of negative stigma attached to disabled or disability. But I like to reframe it and say that the person themselves are not disabled. The system disables people. So there's nothing wrong with individuals who need accommodations, because again, back to the point of people's brains process things differently.
Right.
And so the way our system is set up, it only accommodates folks who process things in one specific type of way.
Right.
So that is what causes the disability. It's not the actual people. So I just wanted to clarify that part and make sure we explicitly talk about that. But entrepreneurship, before I even knew I was autistic, it was foot on my neck, okay?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Before we started, I was telling you I used to have a catering business, and it was really tough back then because when I was younger, I didn't know much about a lot, and I was working full-time. I was a consultant. I wasn't a DEI consultant, although my job had aspects of DEI, and I had to travel all over the place, and I had more energy back then. So it was tough then, but now, like, this is how I pay my bills. This company is like a part of who I am, like my brand. I am the face of the company. And being a Black woman with many, many intersecting identities without even knowing I was autistic was difficult.
Right.
In and of itself, because no one teaches you how to be an entrepreneur. No one explains the business side of things and the things that you have to know. There's a lot of research you have to do. I had a business coach, and I know some business coaches are a little janky and scammy, but my business coach was amazing.
Yeah.
And having a business coach really helped me to kind of fast track my knowledge and awareness of things that I needed to know. But outside of that, like, I still had to work on myself. Like, being an entrepreneur reveals so many things about who you are as an individual.
Oh yeah.
And like things that you need to process, like financial trauma, poverty trauma, and like doubting yourself, and just so many things that have weighed on you that you didn't even know before.
Yeah.
So that's like the mental health component side of being an entrepreneur. When you throw autism, and I was recently diagnosed like a few months ago, so this is still very new for me. When you throw in autism, it's like you're having to relearn who you are. So like when you're a baby, up until you're growing, you're like gradually learning who you are.
Sure.
But you get a new diagnosis, and it's like everything was a lie. And you have to start all over, but you're grown. So it's like a lot of stuff have been embedded in how you operate and how you show up. And so to reframe or rethink about those things, and then figure out what you actually need now that you know that you need accommodations, that's a whole other struggle in and of itself.
Yeah.
And then when you add working in DEI on top of it, so yes, there are so many layers to doing this work that I don't think people understand, especially if you belong to a marginalized group, especially if it's Black and femme presenting, and you have darker skin. So like, there's just layers. So we do this work to create equitable access for folks, right? But in doing so, y'all know there's stigma around this work. People get defensive, they don't understand it. There's a lot of negative connotations associated with DEI work. And so you have to constantly advocate for the work that you're doing. Now, if you belong to a marginalized population, you have to also be the recipient of those microaggressive or discriminatory comments because you belong to the group that they feel those strong feelings against, while you're trying to tell them, hey, maybe we want to reframe how we navigate this space, or like be a little bit more equitable. And then they're like, why? Hello? I need you to be equitable regardless of if I'm the person trying to help you or not. Like, as a Black woman, I need certain resources. And then when you add neurodiversity to the mix and all the other marginalized identities, it's a lot to navigate. Yeah. So that's one of the reasons I created DEI Offload, because our work is very nuanced, and if you aren't in this space, you don't quite understand what that is like. To be, it's very similar to psychologists or social workers. If you have to listen to people's traumatic stories all the time, whole time, like, you have your own life and there may be some trauma in your own life, and you have to kind of like put that to the side and be present to help the folks that you're trying to help. And they can also trigger some of the stuff that you've experienced. So it's very similar in that way. And in fact, some of the things that DEI practitioners experience are some of the same things folks like therapists and ER doctors and social workers, and I may even say like public defenders, like people who have to work in traumatic settings. They express or experience things like compassion fatigue and burnout. Burnout is a buzzword. I think everybody's tired, but burnout and compassion fatigue, and I think it's secondary. I can't remember the acronym, but it's secondary stress or secondary trauma.
Like
I can't remember.
Secondary PTSD kind of thing, or
there's a specific term. I want to Google it because I don't want to get this wrong.
No, definitely. I think it's important for people to know too.
I actually have a post. It's not PTSD. It's secondary traumatic stress disorder.
Secondary traumatic. Okay, I have heard of this.
So basically, someone else's trauma stresses you out, essentially. And we actually have a post coming out on Instagram, well, all the socials about this. So I should know this acronym, but forgive me.
You're also juggling 50-11 things. 1,000
yes.
things.
Yes. So yeah, working in DI is hard, man.
It is. It really is. There are some days when I'm like, why am I doing this right now? And I mean, I have my reasons. Won't get into them. Obviously, I keep doing the work, but it does get really, really exhausting. And there are just so many instances where you have to remain objective, and in the back of your head, you're like, oh my God, like here's another story, secondary, again, can't remember what you said, but
I forgot it just that fast. Secondary.
I know. We're going to get it together at some point. I'll add a link in the description, y'all, but when you have that secondary trauma that you're getting from other people, right, it really does become a challenge. And for me, what I find most challenging is when I have to sit through folks who don't don't belong to or have marginalized identities, and there's this like push and pull, and it's just like I want to grab them and be like, why don't you get this? Or people saying things like, I'm afraid of reverse racism, and I have to sit there and actually be objective and have a conversation with them, when in reality, with my identity as a Black woman, I just want to flip a table and be like, I can't. It's really challenging work. And again, one of the reasons I'm so glad like you created the DEI offload space, because I think it's so necessary, and there aren't enough spaces and safe spaces for DEI practitioners to come together and really think through and have that mental health support. Are there any specific strategies or actions or tools that you use to help you navigate your neurodiversity and mental health professionally as an entrepreneur and within the DEI space?
Yes. Do they work all the time? No.
Right.
So I did a video recently that a lot of folks were interested in, about how I provide accommodations for myself. And I was doing this not knowing I was autistic, but it just so happens that that's why I did them.
Right.
But I use a lot of tech and tools to automate a lot of my business processes.
Sure.
And I'll walk through one of them. The main one that is the most helpful and important for me is lead capture. So that means that when people want to work with you, how do you capture that information, and how do they start the process of not the onboarding process, but the cycle of trying to work with you. Sure. And a lot of people have like discovery calls on their websites. Not me, no. I cannot have my Calendly on my website and just give anyone the freedom of just booking a call with me because of overstimulation, one. Two, I'm super, super busy all the time, so I don't even think the calendar would be even open.
Right.
And three, it also gives me some boundaries. So no one can have access to me whenever they want. Like, right. I am not a well of information that you can just take from. Right. I am not here for you to... I'm not your tool of education. Like, that's what Google's for. So I can't just meet with anyone for any reason. And then when it comes to being autistic, socializing is very, very difficult for me. I know y'all are gonna watch this and be like, "What? No, you seem fine. It's a mask. I am masking. I don't typically act like this. How I want to be is slouched back. I don't want to have this shirt on. I want to put my hair up. I don't talk like this normally."
Yeah.
Like, it's so many layers of me showing up and interacting with people. And imagine, so a good analogy that I use is when people get ready for a Broadway play, there are a lot of things you have to do. You have to like gel your hair down and mold it into whatever style. You have to put Vaseline on your teeth. This is also for beauty pageants. Vaseline on your teeth so that it forces you to stay smiling all the time. You have to memorize your lines and have that in your brain. And then you have to walk and move a certain way. And then you get into character. I have to do that every single time I interact with somebody. Every time. So imagine doing that while being knowledgeable about your services, listening to the other person and holding space for them as they say whatever they gotta say, processing it, and then having to spit back out and respond based on what you do. And so that's a lot. Networking, socializing, even if it's not work related, it's a lot for me. And so having a form on my website where people fill out my contact form, and then breaking it down based on the services they need, it automatically connects to my email CRM, which is ConvertKit, and it automatically sends them the different types of emails based on what they respond. Me nor my executive assistant have to interface with people until the system kind of puts them in the right bucket, and then they can schedule. And I edit my Calendly calendar so that there are certain days that people can't book meetings. Mondays and Fridays is a no-go for me because at the end of the day, I'm tired. At the end of the week, I should say, and then the beginning of the week, I'm coming off the weekend, so I'm not jumping right into meetings. Sure. And I always take a week off of work to align with my cycle because I know I'm very drained during that week. I don't have a lot of energy. So, and then I don't even be looking cute. I look like I need to sleep. So those are some of the things that I do. Yes, there's times when my executive assistant will follow up with folks because not everything can be categorized in a box.
Sure. Similar
to people.
Right.
There's nuance to certain things. So she will email and say like, hey, we just want to get some clarity and put them where they need to go. So that's one important way that helps me set boundaries and not get overstimulated on the front end. This also, I don't have my email publicly either. That also is another way to limit overstimulation, because I can only imagine if my email was anywhere on my social media, I would get a lot of messages and I'll wake up to 50 emails every day and my inbox is always at 0. So I can only imagine if it's 50 of them, I'm going to sit there and go through all of them because, again, being autistic, I need stuff to be organized in a certain kind of way. I don't like clutter. So yeah, those two things are the main things. There's a bunch of other things. Like if I showed you my Convert kit, I have probably like 30 automations set up for different things across the business. And we have so many offerings, I need them. And I don't have a big team of people. So it's only me and my executive assistant. So I need all the automations and stuff. So yes, automated processes and systems, that has been a lifesaver for me.
Right. Yeah, I need to definitely leverage those more. I still just can't wrap my head around how people use Calendly. I think early on when I started consulting and, doing what I was doing, it was easier because the things I was doing were much more streamlined, but it's like in this multi-hyphenate world that I'm living in, it doesn't work for me, and none of my weeks are the same. None of my days are the same. And I don't like people having access to my calendar and being able to drop stuff on. Even if I create a block of time, I'm like, no, like I need that autonomy and like that control over it. But I definitely see how automated tools can help. Like there are so many instances where, email inquiries, I'm like, we could have literally hit copy and paste and AI could have been doing this. So great advice. If y'all are not using automation tools, check them out. What was the name of the tool again? The main one that you're using?
It's a lot of them. I'll list them out really fast. Paperform is the form platform that I use. They have automations built in. ConvertKit is the email. Okay. CRM. They have tons of automations. Zapier is an automation tool that connects different tools together. Okay. Calendly has their own built-in automations. They can automatically send emails and reminders. There's something else they just added, but I can't remember. And Airtable is also good for organization. I use Notion a lot. You should see my Notion. My Notion is like, seriously, it's like my whole company in one place. What else do I use? Payment processing stuff. I talked a little bit about this on TikTok, and I actually have a video coming out on Monday about this where I showed like behind the scenes of how I set some stuff up. Nice. Even Slack, you can automate messages and like schedule messages in Slack. You can automate stuff and connect a bunch of tools to Slack. So there are a bunch of tools out there. What I use is not like the gold standard because they're like Dubsado is a great tool that combines a lot of those tools together in one. Okay. I just haven't mastered Dubsado. But if you get the hang of Dubsado is a good tool. Okay,
cool. At the end of the day, do what works for you, but I think these are all great tools. So make sure y'all go check them out. I'll add some links below. And I feel like maybe these companies are watching you and need to give you a sponsorship or something.
I was about to say.
You out here plugging these tools. Like,
I was about to say, yes. Because,
I tell you. How can people sort of improve and better accommodate and uplift neurodivergent folks?
There are a bunch of ways, and I think it depends on the individual, because me being autistic, I am a very small percentage of autistic folks that are verbal, that I don't even want to say I have low support needs, because they're not low. They're just support needs that don't impact my everyday work life. And that's not even true either. Like, I've just gotten so good at masking and doing compensatory strategies to help me navigate life. But what I'm trying to say is the community of autistic folks who need a lot of support, the percentage of those folks are higher. So I don't want to use me as the standard of providing accommodations, because there are people who need way more accommodations. Sure. And they should be centered, just like how we approach all types of DEI work. We center those who need the most level of resources and support. So I can just speak from my perspective and what I would need and what I have seen. When it comes to neurological disorders, things like being overstimulated and the need to provide resources for those with limited executive functioning skills. So for people with ADHD, for example, some people might struggle with being organized. And at work, if you have your systems and processes clearly mapped out and organized in a way that everyone can understand them and they're visible, and you train folks on how to navigate the systems, that helps autistic folks too, because like me, my whole life is set up that way. So if I see that, I'm good to go. I will feel at home. I will feel amazing. And I know folks with ADHD, they will have a guide, and that can help them figure out how to organize their own personal work, or their managers can know to work with them to help them organize stuff in a way that works for them. Some folks with ADHD may not struggle with organization. They may struggle with like time management, because there's a part of executive functioning where you kind of forget time. And giving flexible work hours, for example. So when people say they want to work from home, that's not just because people want to stay in their pajamas. Like, there are people with disabilities who have a hard time just getting out of bed. Like, people have chronic pain. People need, they use a wheelchair, or they have someone to help them get out of bed and start their morning routine. And that can be done in an hour. And then to sit and commute to work. Some people can't even drive, and they need like additional help with transportation. Like, you don't know people's individual circumstances. But again, if you create resources and accommodations for those who need the highest levels of support, it benefits everyone. And I think that's the curb effect, where accommodations for those who need it the most can benefit all people. So someone who uses a wheelchair, they can't see, they can't talk or hear, and then they happen to be autistic as well or have ADHD. If you provide accommodations for that person, think about people who they can walk, but they may break their leg. Now they can use some of the stuff in place that was already in place for those folks, and you don't have to create something new again. So if we just set up the systems already to be equitable and accessible for everyone benefits. Even like if someone gets pregnant and they're on bed rest, if you already had the flexible work policies in place, you wouldn't have to figure out how to accommodate them. They could just do what was already happening for the folks who needed that, who have disabilities. So things like flexible work hours and working from home, the option to work from home. And when I say flexible work hours, meaning people can work whenever they want. When I was working with contractors, they literally worked whenever they want. Like, some people's timesheet said they were working at like 1 a.m. That's not my business. They did what they had to do.
Yeah. I mean, I can relate. That's when I do some of my best work, is like 11 to 1:30 a.m. block. It's quiet.
Yeah,
no
same.
one's slacking me. I'm in my element, getting stuff done. So, and it gets done. It doesn't matter what time it is. It gets done.
Yeah. And I think people are so scared of providing that level of freedom because there's aspects of control and needing to know what everyone's doing all the time. Why?
Right.
One, you're creating more stress for yourself. Why do you need, don't you have other people to, you have your own self to worry about. Like, why do you want to have to manage all these people's day in and day out all the time, as long as they're meeting their work objectives? So yeah, flexible work hours for autistic folks that have to be in the office, having a space where they can work by themselves, not having expectations for people to be enthusiastic and charismatic and bubbly and always smiling and talking to folks. Like, not everyone likes to talk to people, and that doesn't mean that they're not a team player.
Right.
A team player is someone that can work with their teammates and provide or meet their work objectives and support the team if someone needs support. That has nothing to do with smiling and going to play beer pong after work. Right. So I need people to understand and reframe how they think about work and what the expectations are. Are you expecting people to meet their work objectives is what you're upset about impacting that? And if you believe it is, why? Like, I need people to think and get to the root of like why they believe what they believe, why they have the expectations that they have, and why are they setting these parameters? Like, what is the end goal of having someone smiling all the time?
Right.
So you can feel comfortable. What does that have to do with accomplishing the mission of the organization?
Right.
Like, if you're already comfortable doing your job, why does someone else need to make you comfortable by smiling at you? So I kind of went off on a tangent, but because people used to tell me all the time, like, oh, you need to be more engaged with your teammates. And I'm like, I show up, I talk to y'all. I'm not going to be smiling because that's just not my personality.
Right.
And I don't necessarily feel comfortable talking how I normally talk outside of work or whatever, because there were microaggressions happening and yada, yada, yada. So yes, giving people flexibility in how they show up, where they work, how they work, the time of day they work, and also I was going to say, for overstimulation, to reduce the occurrence of overstimulation, thinking about the lights in the office, like really bright. Those lights in the office, they always hurt my eyes. Yes, fluorescent lights. Those are too harsh on my eyes, and I know a lot of autistic folks don't like those. If people are talking loudly all the time, the freedom to wear headphones, and there are other things that I'm trying to think about. So like on an individual level, folks who want to think about how to accommodate themselves, you can bring fidget spinners if you need to. You can, I told someone in DEI Offload the other day, one way that they can manage overstimulation in terms of meetings is to put blocks on your calendar, to say like you're out. You don't need to put the specifics. Even if you're not out, just block off the calendar and pick a day that you want to have a no meeting day for yourself and block that off all the time. If you want to have meetings between certain hours, that's what I do. I do not take meetings before 11. If y'all see this and you want to work with me, just know, please, I won't be any good to you and I'm gonna be stressed out and annoyed and I won't be able to show up nice and pleasant.
I feel that 100%.
So I don't know. That's the other thing. Like if companies allowed that level of flexibility, everyone would just show up well rested, and then maybe they would be as nice as you want them to be. They won't be so grumpy.
Right.
And people would just feel more comfortable. So
yeah. Definitely. To your point earlier about, people saying you need to smile or like you're not engaging enough with your teammates, I feel like neurodiversity aside, that's something that Black women have to face so frequently, not just in the work context, but even outside of that. I was walking down the street the other day and somebody was like, smile, and I frowned at him because I'm like, no, I'm not upset. I'm not mad. I'm not angry. I'm not sad, anything. I was just in my zone. I have my headphones on, walking my dog. You really think I'm about to overexert my facial muscles? Like just walking down the street smiling? Like for what?
Yeah.
But there's also in the context of work, like this idea that I need to like be your best friend. And I think you're spot on. Like, why do you need that from me? If I'm doing my work, if I'm being respectful of you and the rest of our team, I'm engaging how I need to engage. Why is it? What more do I need to bring, right? That shouldn't be a requirement, and it's never been a requirement for anyone else, any other demographics. So again, I hope people reflect on why that is and that thinking that they have. The other thing that I wanted to just kind of add here too is, when it comes to people, workplaces, companies, organizations providing accommodations, sometimes you need to actively solicit and ask people if they need accommodations, because some people are just so hesitant and fearful. They don't want to be otherized. They don't want to stand out. They don't want to be, quote unquote, causing problems or things like that, because there's this fear of how am I going to be perceived? Are people going to think I'm asking for special treatment? So take it an extra step further to ask, or even just let people know, like, if you need accommodations, we're here. Reach out to us and make sure they are aware that they have access in that as a resource. Because again, some people just aren't going to come forth with that. And I think we can really help a lot of folks if we're saying, hey, I'm here for you. We have this, or if we don't have it, we're going to make it happen.
That's a really good point. And I think the concept of power dynamics play into this. It's not just related to DI work. It's all types of relationships. I talked about this with my therapist. She said, you know how we say, like, if people have privilege, they're the ones who need to be doing more work. That applies in all types of scenarios and interactions. If you have the capacity, like if you don't need accommodations and it won't take anything out of you to provide them, and you're comfortable talking about it because you don't even need them, so there's no stigma attached to it, you should be the one to say, hey, do you need any type of support? How can we do that for you? And just broach the conversation so that people know at the very least they can talk about it. And I want to also say that some folks may not know. They may not know what type of support they need. Right. And they may not know how to verbalize it, but they know they need something. So I do think also it's on leaders and middle managers and folks who make decisions in the workplace to learn more about accommodations and understand what that means and take the initiative themselves to just have it in place. Work with people who are disabled to provide consultations to help you set it up. And just have it in place. You don't even need to ask anybody, because if it's just there, people can just come and use it. They don't need to ask. They don't need to get nervous that there's going to be a target on their back or a stigma. They can just go and take advantage, and no one needs to know. The same thing with how it's set up in schools. When you need additional help with like taking notes or something, you go to the disability center and tell them like, hey, I need help X, Y, and Z. They help you figure out how to get the support you need. And they're the ones that talk to your teacher or give you however the process is set up. But you're not physically having to do as much. All you need to do is go to the place and ask for it or say like, I need it. But it's already, the infrastructure is already there. So I think corporate can take, this is a one time, I feel like corporate can learn from academia and kind of take some of that infrastructure and implement it for themselves.
Yeah, definitely. I know this is DEI in 5, but we're on DEI in 5 extendo version today because Dr. Sam is dropping some gems. I have one more question for you. What advice would you give to other entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs? And this could be as it relates to working in DEI or even outside, because I know you have that experience, but especially for those of us that do consider ourselves to be neurodiverse. What's some advice you have for us, aside from what you've already shared, the tools and all that?
So I work with folks who are starting their own consultancy or small business company, whatever. They're trying to work independently. I work with folks to get the process started and outline their processes. And the one thing I tell everyone, regardless of where you're working, what you're trying to do, if you are neurodiverse or not, is to figure out how you want to show up in your business or as a freelancer or as a consultant. And what I mean by that is think about your values and think about how you want your day to go and write it out and be as detailed as possible. So do you want to wake up to an alarm or not? I don't. I just wake up when my body says get up.
Yeah.
And do you want to be able to eat breakfast? Do you want to meditate? Do you want to take a walk, go work out? Whatever it is, you have children and you need to have time to spend with them or take them wherever you need to take them.
Sure.
Think through your day. And the reason why I say that is because that is what keeps you grounded, and that is what helps you to build your processes out around your life versus your life having to adapt to your work.
Right.
And that's very important because if you have that foundation, that is what helps you to set healthy boundaries and to communicate your needs and to set up the types of support and accommodations you need, and then to also have a healthy balance. I don't even think we should have a work-life balance. Work is just a small aspect of our life. It shouldn't be this duality where it's taking up half of our life. Right. And the reason why we're working independently is to have that level of freedom and agency over our lives. So we need to kind of divest from the corporate grind ideology and mentality. So that's why I recommend that for people starting out. And it seems very simple, but I'm telling you, it sets the tone and the mindset for how you're going to show up. Because when I first started, I wanted my calendar to be packed with meetings and to be busy all the time, because that's how it was working for a company. And I'm like, why am I doing this? I literally do not have to, like, this is my thing. I could do it however I want to do it. Figuring that out sets the pace for everything else you do. And then you can figure out the types of services you want to offer that aligns with those things that you figured out.
Right.
Because if you want to wake up whenever you want to wake up, you can't be having 50 billion clients every month. Because how are you going to meet with them? You're going to have to get up at 9 or be ready by 9 and work till 5 if you're going to take on that many clients. So thinking about like how you want to show up, the types of clients you want to have, how many clients, how often you want to meet, if you want to meet with people on the front end, if not, all of that informs all the processes you set up.
Right.
And then you set them up and then you automate them. And that's your solid foundation.
Yeah. Excellent advice. And I can't agree more. Like, having, especially that organization piece for me has been so critical. Like, I live by, similar to you, like, I need inbox zero. I don't know if that's good or bad at this point. I might need to get out of that habit, but it works for me. With my email being cleared, I need a calendar, and it has been color coded since the beginning of time, because otherwise I don't know if I would stay on task, because, you know, for me, I get into flow states when I'm really enjoying some work I'm doing. And if I don't have my calendar to alert me, I'm still going to be in that flow state doing the same thing, which is a miracle, because ADHD will have me all over the place sometimes. So I do need those reminders to be like, all right, on to the next thing. I will say one thing I wish I learned early on is that you can't be afraid to iterate and adapt. So once you realize, and we've had conversations about this before, where, you know, I think some months back, I was at a point where I was like, I am tired of this. I can't do this. And I think it's because the way I was working was no longer fitting my goals, and my goals had shifted, but I hadn't shifted, you know, my schedule and the things that I needed for me. And I hadn't really thought about, okay, now that my goals are shifting, what do I need my day-to-day look like? And so just making sure you're reminding yourselves to, you know, periodically check in. Am I still aligned with my goals? And not only that, is the way that I'm working and that I'm crafting and shaping my life and my calendar and my schedule, does it still work and does it align? So yeah, don't be afraid of change. I mean, I think that's one of the hardest things in entrepreneurship, but it is inevitable. Things are constantly evolving.
Yes, being flexible and being okay with pivoting. It's okay to pivot.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Any final thoughts? Things you want to plug? Things you want to tell the people?
Speaking of pivots,
Yes.
I am pivoting, kinda, sorta. I sent out an email to the email list earlier this week. I haven't told anybody exactly what it is, but we're changing some of the services to align with my needs and what I like to do and what lights me up. And it's a niche area that I think is it's very much needed for a lot of folks right now. And I figured it out because just by that video of me talking about how I provide accommodations for myself, a lot of people had some of the same questions about, like, how can they do this for themselves, and companies wanted to know how can they take aspects of what I do and put it and implement it into their operations. So there's a little bit of pivot happening, and if you're not already signed up for my newsletter or interacting with me in some type of way, LinkedIn, join DEI Offload. We have an app. If you go in the Apple Store or the Google Play Store and type in DEI Offload, you will see it in there. It's for folks who work in the DEI or DEI related spaces, so activism, advocacy, HR, accessibility, belonging, justice, all the things. If you do that type of work, even if you are part of an ERG or do like supplier diversity or ESG or CSR, you can join the community and prioritize your mental health and just be around folks who understand and get it. And yeah, follow us on all the socials, DSRD Consulting, everywhere, LinkedIn, Instagram. We do have a YouTube. We don't have any videos yet, but the goal is to add some at some point. Yeah. I've been on plenty of YouTube, but I don't have my own videos. So yeah, just connect with me, and I'd love to be in touch with folks, neurodiverse folks working in DI space. Happy to connect with you.
Awesome. Well, I so appreciate you always sharing knowledge, creating spaces, and I can't wait to see what this next phase is for you and what it looks like. And like I said, I'm part of DEI Offload. I tend to be a lurker in pretty much all spaces that I'm in, but I love, I of course love the mental health aspect of it, but I really appreciate that there's a space where people can pop in and ask each other questions, whether that be about setting a budget for a client, or how do you push back on a client, or if you're working internally, how do you deal with different issues within the DEI space. It's just super valuable. So definitely check it out. All the links are going to be below, and yeah, I can't wait to have you back. Maybe we'll do a check-in to see how things are going, see how things have changed, what's new, all that good stuff. But yeah, thank you again. Appreciate you.
Thank you so much. This has been lovely. I love talking about this stuff.
Yes, love it. All right, y'all. Well, this has been another episode of DEI in 5, although it's more like DEI in 45 today, but it is what it is. Thanks for joining. See y'all back here soon. Bye.